Hello, I'm Dr. Louise, and this is Dr. Louise Thinks, a channel dedicated to helping everyday folks connect with the healing power of philosophy. This week's video continues our conversation about friendship. Recently, we've talked about what friends are for and the dark side of friendship. But what would it really take to rise to the challenge and be a good friend? It looks like we're doing a bit of a deep dive here into the philosophy of friendship. So I'm putting together a playlist with all the friendship-focused videos, which you are welcome to check out. The question of what makes a good friend is one that philosophers have been puzzling about for a long time. Aristotle thought friendship might itself be a virtue. On his ethical theory, which now we call virtue ethics, he had a list of virtues he thought folks ought to be striving for. Friendship, for him, was on the list. But, of course, he had a pretty narrow definition of friendship since he supposed it was only possible between two men. This was true on his view because only men have the capacity for both intellectual and moral virtue, both of which for Aristotle were required for friendship. But never mind the obvious ways Aristotle got this wrong. He thought that being a good friend was the sort of thing that we should pursue. Philosopher Simon Keller argues that Aristotle's conception of friendship as a virtue is the wrong way to go. He has a different conception of what it means to be a good friend. To help us understand his view, he invites us to consider what it means to be honest and what it means to be devoted. He then shows us how being a good friend is much more similar to one of these than the other. To be honest means that you care about the truth and do not like to deceive or cheat anyone, even a little bit. That is why you act honest in a wide range of contexts. When we accurately say that someone is honest, it means that we can predict that, assuming nothing big changes, this person will act honest in other situations in the future. Now, to be devoted means that you and your life are characterized by various instances of devotion. So when we accurately describe someone as devoted, we are saying that this person is capable of devotion and has lived a life marked by that devotion. However, when we say someone is devoted, it can still be an accurate description, even though this person may not always be devoted to all things. A devoted person can absolutely fail to display devotion in particular contexts. For example, I may be devoted to my religion. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, by the way. But I may not be very devoted to my hobby of playing video games. So long as there are several cases over the course of my life where I am devoted to one or two things, then my failure to be devoted to my hobby of playing video games is not a problem for the overall description that I am a devoted person. Simon Keller argues that being a good friend is more like being devoted than it is like being honest. This means that we may accurately be described as being a good friend, even if there are several cases in our lives where we fail to be good friends to particular people. The description of being a good friend applies not because you can predict exactly who or when I might be good friends to someone, like you can predict with a quality like honesty, but because my life overall is characterized by various instances of being a good friend. Here, Keller is arguing that being devoted and being a good friend are both what we call emergent properties. This is quite different than the way people often think about friendship. Consider your friend Caitlin. When you act as a good friend to Caitlin, ideally you do that action because specifically you care about Caitlin. If our view of friendship requires us to say that you take that action toward Caitlin merely because you're a good friend as some generic quality, it's almost insulting. We do stuff for our friends because of our specific relationship with that person. It almost feels disrespectful to that specific relationship to say, well, I'm doing this just because that's the kind of thing good friends do in this really generic sense. A big part of Keller's view is that friendship is particular. This means you care about the individual. He says, quote, "When you are someone's good friend, you share with her a story. The story of your interactions with Caitlin and of how you and Caitlin grow and change together will be different than the story of your interactions with any other person, involving as it does your response to Caitlin and her response to you as the distinct individual that you are," end quote. Here, Keller is pointing out that our good friends are specifically connected to us as individuals. All of the details of how each of us, as Cocking and Kennett from our earlier videos described, direct and interpret each other is of critical importance in our ability to understanding of what it means to be a good friend. On Keller's account, we have different kinds of good friends over our lives who make up different contributions to our lives. We may have a good friend who we share wild times with or maybe relaxed times with. We may have a good friend who is dependable and constant in our lives, and another whom we share long-term projects with. Each of these folks is a good friend to us in a particular way, depending on the dynamics of how we interact. It turns out that being one kind of good friend may actually exclude you from being a different kind of good friend. For example, if one good friendship is based on the joy of friendly competition, it may be impossible for that very same friend to be the kind of good friend that never tries to outdo you. The second kind of friendship is good because the two of you do not compare or compete with each other. This is not a failure of the competitive friend. These are simply different ways to be a good friend. There are other examples of incompatibility of different kinds of good friends. One good friend may be based on sharing intimate knowledge of your life, and another kind of good friendship may be a person who gets you out of your head and so that you can be in the moment and enjoy a good time. These are both different ways to be good friends. One friend cannot simultaneously be these two different kinds of good friends at the same time. So what does that mean for our question of how to be a good friend? Keller's views suggest that we should stop trying to figure out abstractly what it means to be a good friend. Instead, we need to think about particular friendships in our lives. We need to reflect on what our dynamic is with that specific friend. I think part of what Keller's view encourages us to do is to reflect on what kind of good friend we are most inclined to be. We might be different kinds to different folks. Certainly different parts of me are brought out in different ways depending on who I'm around. But we need to get clearer on the role that we are playing with any of our particular friends. This can help us figure out if we are doing a good job fulfilling that role. Let's see what that might actually look like by turning to a real-world friendship. I'm friends with a woman named Florence. In this friendship, we share projects together, we laugh a lot, and we often vent to each other about what's going on in our shared spaces. Here, I may be the kind of good friend that is a safe space to vent, someone reliable for a good laugh, and a reliable partner in getting projects done. Now that I've identified these different roles, I can consider how I am doing at fulfilling them. Whether I'm a good friend here depends on whether I'm doing a good job at providing a safe space to vent. I'm helping my friend laugh, and I'm being reliable at getting our projects done. This particular way of looking at friendship relieves us of some of the pressure of trying to be a good friend in general, and instead invites us to consider specifically how we are showing up for the friends in our lives. So if you're wondering whether you are a good friend, maybe you should start by getting more specific. What do you think of Keller's view? Do you think it's possible to be a good friend in general? Or does that question really truly depend on all the nuances of the particular friendship dynamic? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this adventure through practical philosophy, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, stay curious, be thoughtful, and keep asking those questions. Bye-bye.